Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this wisdom and inspiration with friends and family. When you look in the book of Numbers, chapter 12, and it describes how Miriam, that is the sister of Moses, how she spoke about her brother. Now, she didn't have any overt intention of speaking lashon hora, which means literally translated bad language, which is gossip, which is totally forbidden. But she was discussing something which was fresh news to her, and she only became aware of just recently. If you look in the previous chapter where Moses appointed the 70 elders, and then there were two people who were not included in the number 70. They were the excess of the number 70, but yet God chose for them to become prophets. And when Moses, his wife, heard about this, she remarked, "Oh, woe is to their wives," because up until now, the only prophet that existed was Moses. And her experience was that Moses had to divorce his wife. He separated from her, at least, because he was constantly in the mode of speaking with God. He had to be totally removed from regular mundane life, which, by the way, I just want to say parenthetically, this isn't the case for anyone else, as you'll see here in the verses. Moses was exclusive in this. But in any case, Miriam goes to now her brother, Aaron. Obviously, they share a common interest. Moses, Aaron, Miriam, they're siblings. And she talks to him about it. For a person of her spiritual stature, this was considered gossip. And therefore, immediately she broke out with a terrible, I would say, disease, a terrible illness. We'll call it leprosy, which typically, as we see elsewhere in the Torah, comes along and is a direct, so to speak, consequence of one who speaks lashon hara, one who speaks gossip. And now for 7 days, which is the process that it takes for it to not only heal, but to become relieved of its impurity, and thus be able to re-enter the camp, re-enter the community, Miriam had to be isolated, as is the case, as you can see back in the book of Leviticus, in the discussion of the tzaraat, or we call it leprosy, although it's not actual leprosy. And thus, the Torah tells us, if you look in verse 15, that she was isolated for 7 days outside of the camp, and the people did not travel. They did not continue on for all those days that she was isolated until she came back into the fold of the community. And then it concludes with verse 16 that says, and after that, that's when they traveled. That's when they left that location and went to the next location. What does this tell us? What is this lesson? Why did this happen? The Torah makes it a point to tell us, to emphasize that they didn't travel for all this time and only traveled right afterwards. That means, had this not happened, had Miriam not been isolated, they would have traveled 7 days earlier. In other words, they were already bound to travel, and yet they suddenly got held up by this incident, and this compelled them to wait there for 7 days. Obviously, with God's direction, they would not travel if the cloud moved on. Obviously, the cloud didn't. This tells us something very powerful. If you look back in the book of Exodus, if you look in chapter 2, verse 4, and there it describes what happened when Yocheved, the mother of Moses, when she put the little baby Moses into a little bassinet, put on it some waterproof materials as best as she can, and put it into the water. And the Torah tells us, his sister stationed herself from afar, from a distance, in order to protect him, to know what's going to be with him. And she was the one who ran over and volunteered to bring a nurse to nurse him, if you recall. Look it up. The sages tell us that for those few moments, because not a great amount of time elapsed from when the mom put him into the water to when the princess Batya, that Pharaoh's daughter, appeared on the scene. So she was there for not so long, maybe an hour or so, not even. And yet, for that, look at the reward. An entire people, millions of people were held back from traveling. And if you recall in the previous class, we said that that traveling age had a purpose. That purpose was all put on hold, was all suspended. Everybody's business was suspended to give honor to this special woman and not to leave her alone and isolated for this small act that she did, which was an act that's perhaps you can say a very logical one, a very natural one for a sister to want to protect her younger baby brother. And still, look how God rewarded it. This tells us God pays his debts, and he pays them very well. When you do something good, when you do an act of kindness for another, even if your motivation was perhaps not even the purest, but the fact is you brought good to another, God never remains in debt. God will certainly repay you and repay you very, very well. So never hesitate. Of course, this should not be our motivation, but never hesitate from doing good, from helping another, even at the cost of your own time, of your own effort, of your own energy, of your own comfort, of your own money. God will certainly pay back.